Len, welcome to Coffee with Curtis. How are you doing?
I'm well, Rob. How are you? Nice to be here.
You're very welcome, and I'm excited for our conversation today because we met probably about 6-7 months ago, and we've built up a relationship over those sort of half-year period of working on a project jointly together. And it's been really exciting to watch you do your craft. So I want to share the way that you do that with our listeners and take them on a bit of a brand strategy journey today. I think back actually then to when we first met. And this, again, I hope you don't mind me telling this story, but within the first 10 minutes of meeting you, Len, we talked about two big things. The first thing was that we were having lunch. We were actually having lunch, in this joint client. And you came out with, first of all, that you were gay. And then about 10 minutes later, you start talking to me about lovemarks. And I'm like, I need to compute all of this. First of all, he's giving me all this information, which is amazing. And then I'm like putting 2 and 2 together and making like 9. And so it was just like the most brilliant introduction to the, I think, authentic you.
Well, I think to your good point, if you do believe that you bring your full self to work every day, then it includes every part of your life because it informs how I think, it informs how I behave. It also informs how I look at business and the opportunity of a brands can be. And being an emotional marketer, it leads to ideas that we'll talk about today. And I think being authentic and transparent is a big part of what makes business run better. So that's my belief.
I wonder whether you would agree with this, that as the years roll on and we get a little bit more mature, and we were talking about a significant birthday for you before we came on air, whether being more authentic becomes easier as you get older because it's not your first rodeo. I definitely think I find that.
Absolutely. And I think it spills into every parts of your life, including your work life. And I think you find much more joy in contributing that way. For me, I love to help companies understand their brands, understand who they are. And that comes with being authentic yourself. You do kind of build trust through your honesty. And it allows me to get CEOs to open their hearts and minds to what their business is about, what their brand means, all through a very personal, authentic approach. Yeah.
It's although I'm probably going to contradict myself here, that maybe it's because we're of a certain generation and we've had to learn to be authentic. And maybe if we give credit to the current generation, it's actually what they value most.
In fact, I think everyone does. I think we just sometimes go about it differently. But if you start from just an honest place, it's easy.
That's very, very true. It's hard to keep up a lie, as they say.
Yes.
So let's dive into some of your wheelhouse, and I want to dive into, first of all, this concept of brand strategy, because that is how I guess you would term your craft. You're a brand strategist. What does that mean to you?
It means far more than I think many people think it is. I think people look at brands as kind of outcomes. They see logos and word marks and colors, and they hear about storytelling. They hear about all the execution of the things you can do with a well thought through brand strategy. But what brand is the summation of what a company's vision and purpose is. I see myself as a bit of a business therapist. So my role is really to help companies, when they come to me, understand themselves better. Because that leads to better work, it leads to better sales engagement, customer engagement, and overall happier workplaces are a result. So really it's understanding a business, helping them operate better through a brand strategy that gives them kind of better work, go-to-market working guidelines. It includes best practices, values, things we commit to, and that drives better business. It informs marketing plans and everything else that we use to sell. So brands help build companies over time while we sell overnight. And so brands are critical in making marketing more effective. And so my belief is empowering companies to understand the benefits of it. It's sometimes misunderstood. And that misunderstanding leads to people not investing in themselves. Because when you don't invest in your brand, you really aren't investing in yourself. And so I come with a very honest plea to CEOs, particularly here in the Middle East, who are newer to this concept, that true better strategy led by brand brings best outcome. And I call it optimizing your business, because that's ultimately what I feel I do. I'm a brand strategist that optimizes business performance, helps companies build better cultures, and at the end of the day, gives CEOs a clear agenda of what they want to accomplish.
That's interesting. I mean, I remember when I was part of the sort of founding team of a SaaS startup here. It's actually how I ended up being in Israel. And your analogy of it being like business therapy is so on the money, because I think for the first 3 years, we weren't doing any therapy. We were just push, see what happens. Once we went into therapy with brand strategists, we were constantly in that tussle and struggle of understanding what are we? Who are we? And we would ask that question a ridiculous amount of times to ourselves. I mean, we were talking almost comically every day. What are we?
What are we? So, great point you're making, Rob. And that's exactly the challenge most companies make. You know, my first meeting with management when they invite me into their organizations to help them is to ask a very simple question. And that simple question often gets 5 or 6 different answers from the same management team. And I will simply ask, what business are you in? And you can't imagine what a simple question like that is, but one that's very important, gets you different answers. And so I facilitate, a kind of therapeutical environment to get them to talk to each other, because many management leads don't talk to each other beyond the day-to-day tasks. And when you get them to step away from the day-to-day desks, get them into a room and talk about the future of their company, what it is and what it could be, you get great energy, great insight, and a lot of disconnection that you realize exists. My job is to connect managers together, leadership, CEO, and give them the understanding of who they are before any work starts. So what business are you in is the simple question I always ask when I start any process.
Wow, I love that. You've already got me thinking.
It's funny because the simple things, life is not meant to become complicated. It's up to us to make it simple. I come at it with a very honest, authentic approach that says, who are you? Who do you want to be? What are you doing now that really makes a difference? And tell me, why is it working? Why is it not working as well as you want it to? And this simple discussion, and I call these workshops, lead to a process where through a few of these workshops, we get to an outcome of really what business they're in, who they want to be, what is their early articulation of what their vision is. And their vision is, what do they stand for? What will they be in the long run? And it gets everyone really enthusiastic and excited about their company again. You breathe new life. You breathe new life into executives who are, working and struggling with day-to-day problems. And then suddenly you come into a room and say, hey, okay, let's put those day-to-day problems aside. Let's look forward and let's understand your business model. And then you may find that all these problems on your desk today start to fade because you may be trying to fix existing broken problems that could be solved with a brand strategy, and you can be focusing your time on bigger, better stuff. So, you get that new place.
That point for me is spot on, coming from the other end of the, traditional, pipeline, as it were, when it comes to sales. And often, how can you expect your customer to buy from you and to understand who and what you are if you aren't quite sure yourself? And we end up in this situation that I see so often at companies, and they'll call us in and they'll say, we're not selling enough. There's something wrong with the sales team. And often we'll go in and look at the sales team and we'll listen to their demos and we'll understand how they're presenting the story of the business and the brand. And that's really the root problem, that they're trying to persuade people on the other end of the Zoom or the phone to buy something that they don't really know yet why they need it because they're not sure about the brand. And it all goes back to the very genesis of what you're talking about.
Correct. I think what's funny and even more important in the SaaS industry, where in my view, in the high-tech industry that we have such plenty of here in Israel, which I really love being part of, is that it's a membership. SaaS is a membership. And when you have repeat customers or customers who potentially can repeat purchase from you, you have the opportunity to build loyalty beyond reason. And that opportunity is through brand, because they're not transacting on price. They're transacting on trust, the relationship they have with customer experience, the relationship they have with the sales process, and the product itself. And when the product is well served through support and understanding, that's a magical moment that can lead to a greater outcome, which I call loyalty beyond reason, which can lead to something very emotional. This emotional connection I call a love mark. And so when done right, we can take brand and give sales a story to talk about that's more than price and more than feature. When we talk about apps today, and I really understand why founders really want to talk about the technology because it's cool. It's the big point of difference for them. And they're excited. And I think that's really important. I think that's great at the first year or two of launch when you're selling the widget. But beyond that, you need to build your why. You need to build who you are, why it matters, and get people really excited about what this could mean for their business beyond the immediate benefit of a new app. So how do we take that story forward? How do we make this a richer sales engagement that's supported by an organization that is really transparent and authentic about doing the right thing? And brand does that. Brand can help do that.
I think what's interesting about what you've said, and I've actually never heard anyone other than you describe it this way, is SaaS is a membership. You know, if I think about, you know, the gym membership or whatever it is, it's a monthly subscription based model. Typically, you might pay annually, but there's often community around that. There's other, as you put it, loyalty beyond reason.
Opportunities.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we always talk, and I know marketers know this well, that it's much easier to gain additional business from a current customer than it is to find a new one. And when you already have a membership base and they're buying from you already, how brilliant would it be to inform them about who you are as you evolve as a brand and keep them up to date with it? They'll respect you that you thought they were important enough to know. Secondly, they know what your story is and your vision is, and they'll want to buy more from you. So building your base should not be defined by new acquisition. Building your base should be defined by both that and more so expanding your current base to buy more from you. And that requires a brand story. It requires understanding of your authentic self. It requires your ability to express your purpose in all the things you do, including your sales narrative, how you support customer experience and customer support, and all the other things go along with a SaaS industry. But I think we're missing an opportunity here. I think that companies in SaaS need to look, as you said, Rob, at this idea that their customers are members, and there is this opportunity to build loyalty with beyond reason with them because they're already with you. And to do that, you need to build a union of love and brand, love and brand together to get to something I call a love mark. You know, make your company turn to something far more than just any trademarked technology piece for SaaS. Make your trademark a love mark. We can talk about exactly. Let's unpack this love mark concept because when you first coined it to me in that first interaction together, and we've discussed it since, I was blown away by it because I just got it. It resonated with me, and the closest one I could think to how I buy things and stay connected to it was Apple, and we'll unpack a little bit more. I mean, I probably was part of that. How should I put it? This idea of hosting the party, let's say, creating some brand fans. But I think the love mark takes it even further. And I'd love you to just first of all explain what you think a mark, or how you explain a love mark, and what does that look like? Like, give us some examples. Let's help our audience understand what is a love mark and how they can start to think about that within their own business. So let me first say that I give credit to Saatchi and Saatchi in 2004 when they published this book called Love Mark. And for anyone listening to us, I'd really recommend they look to that book. It's almost 20 years old. It was written by the CEO of Saatchi at the time. I believe his name was Kevin Roberts. He's since retired and hopefully still with us. But, it's something you come across in your career, and I've been an executive in advertising for more than a number of decades. And it was that book that inspired me to move towards brand as my own discipline, because I always had this need to get behind the firewall, get into the management meetings, and help understand what their agendas are, because often there was always a broken telephone between what the CEO really wanted to accomplish and what agencies and marketers heard in the brief they got. And so I wanted to break that long 50-year problem and circumvent it. And so it became, by time and effort and understanding, a more trusted partner. And so, while you want to make SaaS customers members, on the agency side, I want to become a partner with the clients I serve and not just a service provider. And when you can move those relationships to something that's more emotive and empirical, more important, you get better outcomes. So in the case of what a lovemark is, it's creating a relationship with your brand that has an emotional context. It starts with an experience beyond the functional benefits of the product. In the use of it, over time, people start to love your product because it's so effective. But it also has to do a lot with the culture you're building around that brand, what it means beyond its original purpose, and all aspects of that brand experience. So everything from the engagement, the relationship you build through sales engagement, follow-up, customer experience, and all the other things go with it that today SaaS businesses utilize to serve and make sure that the product experience is resolved and they can function, work with it. But there's something missing in that. There's a chance to develop an emotional connection that goes beyond the reason they're using a product, hence loyalty beyond reason, where you can actually build something more. Apple does this not only through innovation, but through a cultural shift in what is the best way to communicate. What is the most effective way to really engage a more authentic place? So their iPhone evolved to the needs of the customers they listen to, so they can build and create communities and social engagement in ways other phones couldn't. They followed suit. But the product's outcome wasn't just, it's a great screen, it's a lightweight phone, the apps work quickly and everything else, the battery power is long. But what it did was bring people together. And so there's a great emotional context when a product like that can do that in your hand.
But I think it's beyond sorry to interrupt, I think it's beyond even the product. I am such an Apple fanboy that I had an issue a few weeks ago on Apple Notes. It wasn't syncing in the cloud to all my new devices, and I had this new iPad, and I phoned support, got through to the support line in America. And, normally when you're thinking about speaking to support people, I mean, it conjures up, fear and time. And let me tell you, the experience was delicious. Mm-hmm. And I was on the phone to this guy I was probably waiting for 20 minutes. Then I was on the phone to him for another 40 minutes. He then called me back a week later to check that everything was okay. Yeah. And this was a support call, and I loved every minute of it.
You don't want to hang
up. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. With Apple, you never want to hang up. You would think with everyone else from utility services, you want to hang up. So that's all part of building a lovemark, right? Every touch point in the customer experience is imbued with this empowered, high-end customer service, true sensitivity and care. And love and respect is what make customers fall in love with brands. And so absolutely, if you look at Disney, right? Disney was a theme park and a movie, and they made movies. But it's actually all about family. It all became the centerpiece of the family and the home. And if you were the lucky few who got to experience it at the park, it was like magic happening. So this idea of magic and family is what brought Disney to its iconic lovemark status. Every company has a different way at it, but what is common is high quality service and support, engagement beyond any type you've experienced, that builds loyalty beyond reason. And so, again, it comes down to one thing, a relationship that's very emotional. And while we talk about, B2C clients or B2C companies, I think SaaS B2B is probably really primed to convert into an emotional brand because of membership, because of relationship utilities you need to have with your customer. And I think it's going to be really exciting to see how we can build love marks in a B2B space, not just in a consumer space, and make love marks turn into something that powers memberships, repeat business, and grows the SaaS industry.
I think that's a great point, and we're starting to see it with some brands actually. This emotional connection, as you quite rightly put it, this authentic self through the brand, through the employees and the way that they operate. Right. And I think what's interesting is it's not necessarily what you do; it's how you make them feel. Correct. That is the experiential element that goes
how that makes you feel leads to this. Absolutely. I mean, I will say something else. While we're sharing with your viewers today, the opportunities and needs for brand and how can it help move companies into a more emotional relationship to get more business in a sales capacity, in a marketing capacity, where in marketing the messages become more poignant and more powerful because it's not only price or promotion. They're actually speaking about who they are, why it matters, and what it can do for you. I mean, all these things are critical for a love mark and for a brand in general. But I think if I could just switch this slightly to say, on the internal side of how a company organizes itself, is really paramount, because none of what we're saying of love mark can happen unless we're leading with the heart. Now, just to unpack that briefly for your audience, and I don't want to take too much time from you on this podcast, but leading with the heart is a critical piece in getting to a love mark. And to accomplish that, it starts with how you manage and run your workplace. And if I can give you a brief history, that in the Industrial Revolution through the late 1800s and into the early 1900s, industry was all about muscle. It was about building cars. It was about power plants. It was about all the things that raw industry was doing. Over time, as I think innovation accelerated, it became everything about intellect, the brain. And it was all about the internet. It was about programming, IT services, these kinds of things.
Yeah, the era of the knowledge worker.
The era of the knowledge worker. Exactly, Rob. And now we're leading into the era of leading with the heart. And why is that important? Well, the world's become far more complicated with technology. People are feeling more isolated and less connected to their workplace. And this idea of loyalty in the employee context is fading. People are looking for reasons to stay or reasons to leave. The reasons to stay should be that you're led with authentic, transparent leadership where you know what your goals are and you know what your career path is. That's what keeps people tethered to their jobs, not just salary. So if we can get them past that and have leadership that's really authentic, that cares for the employees in every asset of their lives, and that includes not just flexible work from home or hybrid work. I mean, this has become somewhat of the norm. But understanding their individual goals and needs. And every manager needs to be coached by their CEOs and executives to make sure that their teams are listened to, understood. When that happens, and there's more for this in another podcast I'm sure we can get into, then you're leading with the heart. And that means magic's happening internally. You need to have magic internally before you can create magic externally and become a love mark. So Apple does it well because their people are a culture. They manifest who they are every day. It's reinforced in their language, their customer service when you call them as you did, Rob. All this is manifested from internal brand, which I call leading from the heart. And that will lead to a love mark experience if done right.
Look, to some extent, people call this purpose at the moment. And I think actually leading with the heart is actually slightly more on the money, because we know that the generation who are going to dominate the workforce, both now and over the next, 10, 20 years are the millennials / Gen Zers. And they're making buying decisions themselves as consumers, and they're buying things that align with their values, purpose, how it makes them feel, leading with their heart. So it stands to reason that when they go out into the workforce and try and find that job that's going to take their career to the next stage, they're going to want to work for a company that aligns with those brand values. Absolutely. Otherwise, it becomes a self-fulfilling situation.
I think that's a great point, Rob, because every employee is a customer, and that's what you're saying. And understanding your employees' motivations means you know how to tap into what drives them. And and make that a better business workplace, a more productive workplace. And that's what brand strategy does. When you really define one and truly go to your employees saying, this is for you. This is not for me as a CEO. This is for you. You are the company. As a CEO, I am not the company. I'm the face of it. What's important is you understand what we are collectively trying to accomplish. And we're going to give you not only roles, but you're going to get full transparency of how your role impacts the greater cause. And when you do that, you're building collaboration, empowerment, and a culture of success. So it seems so easy. I could say to this, and I have to many, it's just that if we can get past the ego of an executive and put that aside, because ego is the worst thing for business. It gets in the way of everything. And look transparently at your workforce as being, what is your key asset to unlock? The asset of unlocking your workplace is critical to lead to any of the things we're discussing today. And so behavioral leadership, leading from the heart, is a critical piece. And I do executive coaching to help companies and executives understand what that means for them. It does mean checking your ego at the door and trying to really be authentic with everyone you're speaking to. But there's something you brought up earlier in our conversation I want to bring up right now, if you don't mind, Rob, which is this idea of who's the face of the company. And so I'm touching on this now that, the CEO is the face of the company, and he has to set that example. It's thought from the top down. Everyone knows this. Everyone in business knows this. But what they don't know is that the small things matter in how you speak to junior staff, how you empower a team, what the purpose of an all staff is, how you leave them feeling empowered and not demoralized. With pressures of recession today, it's quite easy to fall into the fear mongering that comes from it. In fact, if you are organizing and restructuring your company, it's even more critical to lead with the heart, because you want to keep your top talent, give them purpose and reason to stay, help them know they're building something new and exciting in the new world of uncertainty. And by the way, this is happening all the time. We're always cyclical. The economies go up and down every 7 years. It's no surprise to anyone. What matters is how you weather that storm. And that's what brand strategy is. It inoculates you. Brands inoculate you from the ups and downs of the economy and of business. So if you prescribe to your brand and lead from the heart, you'll do well.
You've just reminded me of an article I read, and I'm trying to remember the company. I won't remember it this time, but they have a policy that you cannot get fired from the company. Obviously, you can choose to leave of your own accord, and obviously, if you did something that was completely, law breaking,
policy breaking,
obviously that would be a no-no. But their view is our company is a family, and in family. Sure. You don't kick out your son or daughter or cousin or nephew because it's not quite syncing. You find out what the problem is, how to improve them, whether to move them into other divisions within the company. And so that actual business said that they started to see a complete change in output and outcomes and the business culture, because everybody knew we're in this together. We actually are a family. And I hate that often used term because companies usually aren't families. A talk for another time.
Don't say we are unless you are. Yeah.
But a business is never a family. We can call it a family, but it's not a family. But in this case, they really did say, we won't be firing you ever. You can fail, but you won't be leaving. We'll find out why, and we'll build that in, and that is with all heart. That is the heart that you're talking about.
I think that's really great. I think there's a tension between leading from the heart and making sure there's no complacency, because kindness isn't necessarily what I believe leading with the heart is. I think honesty is, which means you have the harder conversations with underperformers. It does mean that you don't, uncommunicate that. I think you owe every employee the respect and due they require. And that includes some tough talk sometimes to say, listen, you need to buckle down, or you're not fit here. How about this department? To your point, we don't throw you out like trash. We want to still invest in you. We're a family. You're an asset. We want to optimize. And there's hidden talents in everybody. Maybe that person's in the wrong role. But understanding your employee, back to that, leading to the heart is understanding everyone around you, leads to better outcomes for the company as a whole and for the employees that work there. So I think we're never, subscribing to complacency and quiet quitting. I think we're aspiring to exceptional performance because they're inspired. I think quiet quitting, a topic we haven't discussed but can talk briefly about, is a function of being ignored, a function of not knowing their purpose, a function of them not knowing what their role is, and just falling into a complacency where they only do the minimum because no one around them is empowering them to do any more. And so I think management needs to take more responsibility for quiet quitting, and don't blame the employee as being this millennial or general or whatever generation we speak to and make it their fault. I think it's responsibility of management to inspire every employee and make the workplace more productive.
We're on the same page. Now, I want to talk about love marks for small businesses, because not everyone's going to be able to afford Dr. Len coming in and doing a big brand strategy. So if you're a 2-person business, a 5-person business, even a 1-person business, and you're starting to think, you've heard Len today and you're not sure how to implement your love mark, or maybe love is something that grows over time. Maybe we're talking about initially a lust mark. What advice, Len, do you give to a small company to start their journey on building the long-term love mark?
That's a very interesting question. Actually, you're the first person to ask me that question, Rob. Because
I like to pride myself on being completely original, Len.
Well, you are. That's a good one. And it's not necessarily an easy one to answer. It depends on the industry. But I will say this. When you're a startup, the most important things is basically getting the product right, finding the right customer first, and doing all the right marketing 4 Ps well. And then as you're creating this, you have to ask yourself as a leader, okay, so what kind of leader will I be? So we kind of put that last as opposed to first. So I would say this. Before you start a startup, what is your philosophy? What is the reason for the startup? Why did you do it in the first place? I would recommend any small business who's starting out to write down their own personal ethos. Why I am and why I do. Why I am and why I do. And write that out and say, this is why I'm doing the startup. And it's because it's my passion, because I think it's going to help, whatever those elements are. And write that out at the very beginning. And as you create and get completely, wrapped in the world of startup, which means you have no time for anything else. And you're worried about, the product efficiency. Is it working? Getting it online, finding customers. Keep that little ethos, because a year into your business, reread it. And then talk about, okay, I need to decide now that I have some staff, now I got more than 3 people, I need to start leading. Because when you're a group of 2 or 3, leadership's not as critical, you're just a little group, everyone's within reach. But as you get a little bigger, let's say 5 up, your leadership style starts to matter. Bring that ethos forward and remind yourself what you did and why you did it. And then look at how you want to be a leader. What type of leader do you want to be? I'm hoping that this podcast gives them a sense that these attributes apply to every size of business, because brand reputation, something we haven't discussed, but the reputation side of brand attracts talent. So if you live your truth, if you walk your truth, if you walk your brand, and that could be as simple as, I'm passionately starting a company that's really about helping so-and-so do so-and-so. That's good enough. And if you stand by it, you'll attract good talent who wants to work with you. And sometimes for no money, because they believe in your cause. So that little ethos, which I would then say also, what is your cause, leads to something you need to look at a year after you've launched and start discussing what your brand reputation is. How do I attract talent to continue to grow? Because you're only as good as people around you. And you will find I now need a marketer, or I now need this. First it was sales me and I did everything. At some point, you're going to stratify your business and hiring a marketer to help you. And that person, choose wisely. They have to subscribe to your cause. They need to be the right fit and know what you're trying to accomplish, because you don't want them in and out. Many companies just do this. They find some high qualified person with all the right job history. Well, do they the same heart as you? Hiring today, if I can say this, is more about soft skills. You can teach technology to people, assuming they're reasonably intelligent. But you need to hire for soft skills, because you're buying the whole person. if they're the right character, the right values as yours, they'll be trustworthy. They'll be someone you can talk to and lean on. You want, mini partners in the context of a small business that help grow with you. And these mini partners have to be the right fit. So HR is now looking at soft skills even more than they are hard skills. And the shift from hard to soft skills in the HR workplace environment is a huge paradigm shift, which is leading to why I talk about leading with the heart. Because that's what leadership from the heart really means, that we start prioritizing soft skills, both in terms of how we hire and also how we lead. So for small businesses and for large, leading from your heart matters. It attracts top talent. It means your business will run smoother and better. And it means you're managing down tons of problems because most of those are from employees.
I completely agree, and those soft skills are obviously critical. I think they always have been. They've just come to the front. They've surfaced at this stage in our evolution to be really important in business. Mindset is also, for me, an absolute critical one. How that person is showing up, not just who's showing up, how they're showing up, is almost the most important factor in how they're going to be productive during that day, whether they're aligned with who you are as a business. And that mindset piece is actually also a little bit overlooked, but I think should be something that is a big component in aligning on who you're hiring, who you're working with, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. I think motivation and career passion, you want to be someone who wants to accomplish something for their lives, and it's not just hiring for kindness. You're hiring for intent, purpose, quality, good person. Those are the features of soft. And, they lead to so much more when you've done that, because you could bring in a whiz and you could be so disruptive in a company's culture and it becomes counterproductive. So it's a balance. I don't think it's one or the other. It just means that, as you said, Rob, we're starting to prioritize soft skills more as we look to culture creation that's more successful, a world of dysfunction. We know the workplace is suffering today and has been for some years. Since Corona and since the redistribution of life standards and how people choose to live, it's brought this up even more. Do I love where I work? That matters, because your customers are only as happy as your employees are. If your employees aren't happy, your customers won't be.
Which is why we see this big gig economy and the creator community and people trying to just do things on their own and, live the life that they think they believe that they want to go and live. So we're Len at the Brand Strategy Oscars, and Len has been nominated. And some of your work needs to be shown, the portfolio of your work needs to be shown to the Academy directors to decide if you're worthy of winning. Which 2 or 3 brand strategy projects during your career are you most proud of? What did they look like? What are they?
Oh, thank you for that question. There are a few. I think the biggest standout for me was reinventing the post business in Canada called Canada Post. They came to me and asked, can you reinvent us? And as you might know, mail is boring, and most post businesses deliver mail. Over time, though, they began to deliver other things too, like some parcels. So they came to me. They're basically a brown envelope, and my job was to make them something far more exciting. It started, honestly, understanding their business first. I found out that they deliver 98% of all parcels to all Canadians. By the way, I'm from Toronto, Canada, and now live here in Tel Aviv. But and so I found out they delivered all the parcels, and Canadians did not know it. For many reasons, they weren't wearing uniforms to the door as the last mile in getting FedEx products or UPS products to their door in their Canada Post outfits. So no one knew it was an invisible avatar who showed up at their door. And so they never took credit for all the deliveries they did. So I went into understanding the real business of their business. And I found out that while mail is still there and it's an obligation for bills and Crown and other stuff, it's declining, the real business is parcels. And so I built a brand strategy that led to this idea that Canada Post delivers the online world. And by giving Canada Post credit for all Canadians, that they are the ones brands who deliver the online world, change the conversation, change the positioning and strategy for this company, and turn them from a crown corp, meaning a government-funded business, into a hugely perceived privatized industry that was doing great things for all Canadians. So we built a campaign. I built a strategy that led to communications, and it also led to infrastructure change. So we took over Wendy's and other hamburger restaurants that were no longer in use and turned them into 24-hour parcel delivery and drop-off centers. And we provided kiosks and materials to wrap your own parcels and drop them in the mailbox. So you can drop a parcel off anytime, anywhere. And the brand experience that wrapped them was not just digital. It was quite physical too. And we provided them an end-to-end experience that was unique and special, to the point where people were lining up to just walk into the parcel store to experience the whole environment of the digital world. We had internet access. We had buying and Shopify access within their stores so that people could actually purchase, not just ship. So we moved their business to an end-to-end experience. Further, all the mail trucks that were driving around were thought to have mail in it. And truth, they were all parcels. Mm-hmm. And this is a huge network. They have more trucks than any other company in Canada. They're everywhere. There's like 7,000 trucks that Canada Post owns and runs. So we did something with living on the online world. We took the little cart you see when you click on a purchase. This is, by the way, a strategy that now is 10 years old or 7 years old. Before internet, it's quite the way it is with online purchases. And we made that cart our own. We made it red, which is aligned to the logo of Canada Post, which is red, our red leaf, Canada, our flag, and wrapped the trucks into a red cart.
Wow.
And so all you saw on the road were red carts. And their wheel hubs were done as red, so the wheels were red. The cart was wrapped around the whole truck, and the back doors had a beautiful fresco of boxes falling out of it three-dimensionally. So people driving behind saw a truck carrying their parcels. It became so famous that we built an app that allowed you to track your purchase and see the red cart coming to your door over time. Back then, there was no Wolt, no Uber, no taxi service that showed what today is commonplace. This was the first time anyone's ever done it. And so we turned our red cart into an icon, and that made the brand a love mark. A boring mail company became famous for its cute little red cart. So at Christmas, we launched this campaign and allowed grandparents and parents to send gifts to their children who were waiting for Santa Claus to show up. And all they had to do was they were sent the app. And in the dark space of the internet, where when you buy, you don't know what's happening until you receive, we filled that dark space up.
Wow.
Traveled to your door, and you got to see when it was coming. And then when it arrived, the app would explode with a message as a gift card from the person sending it. So we built a brand strategy that turned this company into a love mark through better experiences from the physical stores, through the app and the internet experience of online shopping. And not only were we delivering the online world, we actually began to own the online purchase, not just the delivery, because the cart was the icon for the purchase. So we would say, click your cart and leave the rest to us. And we then served the rest of the purchase. So we began to own the purchase and the delivery. This was groundbreaking, and maybe it's perceived less so today because now there's so many applications that do this. But at the time, it was not being done by anybody. What also wasn't done was the complete physical and digital, the brick and mortar and digital experience being combined. It tripled their business to the point where the distribution centers were overloaded and they didn't have enough 18-wheelers to drop off, meaning they had the trucks, but they couldn't drop off. And they had to build 2 new distribution centers across Canada to deal with the overflow of business that was resulting. And now since Corona, last I heard, they built a 3rd because that also amplified their service. So they're probably the most successful mail business turnarounds. And we won the World Post Award for Innovation the year we launched.
Wow. So it's literally, it's already been awarded. But Len, if I'm sitting on the Brand Strategy Oscars here, you are winning. What an incredible story. That is
in my LinkedIn profile for anyone to see.
But I think
it's dated, but it's a very good spot.
But I think what's really interesting about what you've said is, although you then built out the pipeline of other activities and infrastructure, you made the brand famous when they decided beforehand to be almost anonymous. Correct. And I can't remember where I read this, but if you don't start clapping for yourself, nobody else will.
Correct.
Or on the reverse, start clapping for yourself, and everyone will start clapping too. And
absolutely,
that's really what you've done.
There's something so beautiful about being able to help a company that way and reinvent themselves, because they were a stamp company where you lick stamps onto an envelope and it was put into a red box.
Wow.
Suddenly that whole experience has changed. Delivery centers, parcel centers, you can walk into other stores and buy coin stamps and shipping material and shop on the internet. Oh, and by the way, I hadn't told you this. We put changing rooms in the post office. So when we launched,
for the postman,
became a big thing. But, lots of returns with clothing, right, Rob? So we put a changing room into every Canada Post store, which was parcel delivery and so on, so that if you got your parcel, you can open it up if it's clothing, try it on. If it didn't fit, you don't leave the store. You just give it back to the desk and have it returned.
So even then, it made it a little bit more sustainable by not driving it back home, checking it, driving back, and wow, that's so interesting.
Return process and ability for you to live online, both physically and digitally, and be not interrupted. We were a facilitator making this process seamless, and it changed everything.
Gosh, Len, you certainly delivered for Canada, excuse the pun, and you've certainly delivered the goods for us today on the podcast. It's been really enjoyable chatting with you, talking brand strategy, love marks. Even we got into the world of lust marks that I think we should explore even further. And I really enjoyed it, Len. Thanks for being here. Thank you.
And listen, everyone on this podcast, I'm Len Wise, and you can visit my LinkedIn profile to see some of that work.
Thanks so much, Len.
Thank you, Rob, for having me today.